hi, of course, and greetings to Justin Rentzel, class of 2008 from Westchester University. It's a delight to get a chance to speak with Justin for the second time this week. I've been familiar with his work for a while, so I'm looking forward to this chat today. Justin, like we said, hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm making it through the week, so it's all that matters. It's a beautiful day out, so.
That's right. Yeah, beautiful chilly day. Now, can you hear me and everything okay? Am I coming through audio? Is all good? Amazing.
Everything on my side.
If you guys have questions, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat. So if anyone wants to weigh in on any of the topics we're discussing, by all means, feel free to do so, and we'll try and incorporate some of those ideas in the conversation. As we said, Justin's a Westchester alumni, class of 2008. Your degree is in graphic and interactive design. I believe that's correct, right?
Yes, sir.
Cool. And you've had a hell of a career. You've worked for a whole range of clients, Chipotle, Dietz and Watson, Dockers, Eggo. I mean, it goes on and on. Like even in just food and bev, like Reckitt Vodka, Hendrick's Gin, Black & Decker, Victory Motors. I could really kind of take up 20 minutes of the talk.
A little bit of every industry.
Yeah. I guess one of the first kind of topics we'll delve into beyond just kind of like a general introduction is like what's like a day in the life or like a week in the life of you working with some of these types of brands and some of these types of initiatives.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you would have asked me a year ago, it would have been 1,000% different. So I recently moved into a creative director role at Insomnia Cookies, and life has kind of shifted a little bit. When I was a senior art director at Red Teddimer, the day in a life was working with one of these clients, and in anywhere from concepting to design work to strategy, a little bit of everything. I was a little bit more, you got to do a little bit more hands-on stuff as a senior art director or a designer role. Now as a creative director, you're kind of managing everything. From a bird's eye view, you're sitting in more meetings, you're working with cross department, the whole way through the company. So, it's just been, every year is different than the last.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the distinction? Because I know we have a few students joining us between some of the positions you discuss: senior art director, designer, creative director. Like what's the hierarchy of those guys?
Yeah, so I can take a couple steps backward to when I first started as a designer, and classic designer role. When I came out of college, it was very sit behind the computer, 8 to 12 hours a day, whatever it was, and you purely did design. While that was fun and everything, later in my career, I started realizing that I've had a lot of interest in commercial work and photography and film and all these other facets of being a creative. And I shifted maybe about 7 years into my career. I shifted over to the art direction role, where you get to play a little bit in everything. You get to be creative as far as writing TV scripts, or you still do your design work, or anything from like digital banners, obviously, to it's a little bit of everything, which it kept it much more interesting to me. Where I used to love design, but now I have all these other tools to go to. So, yeah.
And I think, as you mentioned, some of the mediums, kind of the digital stuff, like the web banners, the websites. Like certainly, there's a great deal of poster and print. Like I love some of the outdoor work you've done. Kind of talking about like design holistically in a moment, but before we leave this topic, you mentioned kind of like a shift after around about 7 years. Like, how does a shift like that happen professionally? Is that kind of at your direction, or you decide you're ready for a change, or is that?
So I think it comes. I feel like it comes between year 5 and 8 for a lot of designers. Some designers are pure designers; they stay in the design realm and they make beautiful work, and some work that I'm really jealous of. But some other ones, they take their design skills in a different direction, and they start applying more photography and more just general creative thinking. And I liked this direction because I could go in many different ways. It kept the day fresh, and it's a kind of a different language, you make that shift, and design, like pure design language, visually is different than when you go down the art direction route. I still would do design every day, but it's
Yeah.
more you're communicating visuals for a retail reason versus more of a content reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Well, I
Mhm.
mean, it certainly sounds like a more holistic kind of approach to whatever
Mhm.
project is at hand, or there's a bit more strategy involved, perhaps. I guess to delve into that, like, why do you kind of feel like what's the role of design in like a broader kind of brand strategy? Why is design important? I guess.
Yeah, it's you have a very brief amount of time to tell a very long, complicated story. So I've always been kind of like a puzzle guy. I like the strategy part of design as well. So when you start getting more into the art direction world, you're putting together not a design puzzle, but more of a puzzle of how do we communicate this story of the brand and tell it in a very short way. When you look at a billboard, you have 5 seconds at the most, if you're lucky, to communicate with somebody. Whereas if you open a pamphlet for a college, you have much more time with that piece than you do. So it's kind of a different wavelength of thinking. It all comes from that same design root, but just different ways of communicating it and the amount of time that you get and the strategy behind it.
Sure. Yeah. Do you find that there's a common attribute or a thread that tends to link a lot of good pieces of design,
Yeah,
irrespective of the medium that they're in?
typography, 100,000
Really?
percent. Yeah, use of typography, how it's laid out. I think it's really the core of any design. It really comes down to that. Whether it's a headline and you're communicating something with the headline, or the way you lay your type out if it's a long body of copy. I think it's pretty much the foundation of, at least in my opinion, of design.
Yeah. Do you find that you're obviously someone who reviews the work of young people and aspiring designers? Do you feel like typography is receiving the kind of emphasis and the attention that you would probably argue it does as a foundational kind of you know part of
Yeah,
design?
and topography is a funny thing because it really is. The way I've seen it is throughout the world is that it's varied amongst trends. Like there's so many trends that come out every year, and everybody kind of follows the trend versus following the way they should communicate for the actual piece.
Yeah.
And trying to find that happy medium where you're on trend and people want to look at it because it seems familiar, but also communicating what you need to communicate. So it's that fine line.
Yeah. Did you find that sometimes that need to kind of respond to trend can be frustrating, or is that where the kind of joy is and kind of figuring
Yeah,
out
it's a
solution?
blessing and a curse. You have to tap into those trends, or else you seem dated as a brand or as a designer or whatever it might be. It's like fashion. You have to keep up
Yeah.
with the trends, but you you want to make sure that whatever the trend is, that you're also communicating what you need to communicate. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting discussing it with you because having looked at so much of your work, and like I'm thinking of a piece, for example, like the work you did for Brew in Philadelphia, which seems to be kind of it's devoid of any trend. It's stunning, but it's reaching what seems to be like a lot further back for some of those ideas and precedent. Like,
Yeah.
where do you like assuming like trend is kind of relevant? Like, where do you go for some of your ideas, some of your kind of inspiration? Like, where are you finding all that magic, I guess?
So that's a good example. That one I kind of did extensive research with all sorts of German beer gardens and breweries and everything. We wanted to create not a German beer garden, but kind of like what's a modern American take on a German beer garden. So I was focused on really diving into like back to the 1300s of breweries in Germany, but I've also did extensive research on restaurants in America and what's popular in America, and kind of merging those two into this modern, fun, quirky brand through like menus, t-shirts, uniforms, all that kind of stuff.
So what's the process like on a project like that? Because again, I know we have several students kind of joining us who'd be interested as someone who's doing all the design work. Like you're approached with the opportunity and then you present several ideas, or are you someone who likes to kind of give a very narrow vision and it's take it or leave it? Like what's the way you prefer to work with a client?
So when you get in the industry, that's actually a really good question because there's two schools of thought, and that's it's very broad, but it's not the way it is everywhere. But there's the school of thought that here's my one direction, right? And this is the way I think it should be, and this is A, B, and C why it should be this way. But then there's also the other school of thought, which you'll see in other companies, where here's three directions. They're all great, but there's not that clear leadership. I've sat on both sides of the table. Brew was one where we're like, nope, this is it. This is the way it should be. We've done extensive research, and the client went with it. But sometimes I've been in that same room, and they're like, where are the other concepts? So it's always a weird game that you play with the clients. Whether you show one concept or whether you show three. So you also have to think as a designer. You have to think in that business mind. What are they looking for?
Yeah, yeah. And do you feel that in instances where you do feel you have confidence and conviction that you've established a really effective solution, do you feel like the role of a designer is respected, or do people, clients, kind of persist in wanting to kind of pull and push your idea to break it?
Clients, again, it comes down to the client. Luckily, we had a client that trusted us for this, but when you get in your career, you'll start seeing, when you start showing three concepts, you'll start seeing what they call as a Frankenstein, where the client, it's always my biggest fear, where the client will pull a little bit from each, not realizing that none of them have anything in common. There's no common thread.
Sure, yeah.
And it all just gets smashed together, and then you'll get weeks down the road in the design process, and they'll say, "Why is this not working?" And that's the tough balance. Like having a little bit of conviction and telling them, this is the way it should be, without, they're paying you to do this, so you can't really say no, I'm not going to do it, but at least trying to state your case.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a situation where that kind of doubling down, that really genuinely backing yourself and standing by an idea is paid off? I guess like Brew would be one example, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's been a few times. The other one isn't really a design thing, more so like a general ad concept. We did the Deets Nuts.
That's
yeah. And that one, you know what? Surprisingly, we sold it through, and we had a lot of conviction behind it, and it ended up being a very, very popular campaign. There was design work and whatnot, but it became a very popular campaign across America, and now it's one of their best-selling products. So, those are the best wins, when you kind of put yourself out there and everything works out for you.
Yeah. And would you say that in those two examples, Brew and Dietz and Watson, is a designer and an art director someone who really has like a stake in the development of that brand, that idea? How do you measure success? Is it in kind of, Brew is a very popular business that does great turnover, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
As is Dietz and Watson, it's like a great brand, and you mentioned, the sales are like, is that how you assess success, or for you is it less in the results and more in the kind of idea, or both maybe?
There's two forms of success, at least the way I consider it. One is a personal success, and are you happy with the work? And more often than not, you're not 100% happy with it, but the client is, and it's still your general vision, which is nice. So that's always a win. But when you start seeing organic sharing and the press releases on your products and stuff, I also consider that a win, because every time we're given a project, whether you're a designer or an art director, you're given a creative brief, and usually on the creative brief there's some sort of a goal or a measure of success, and a lot of times it's just organic sharing, or it's views, or it's whatever it might be. So there's many forms of success, but like when you can get what you want and the client gets what they want, I think that's the best success you can
Sure.
have in a project.
And it seems like there is a partnership there, because it's coming out in the results. Like your work is winning awards, like the one show, the Addies, like multiple times. Under Consideration, I know, is featured. Like, so it seems like good design and a solid kind of partnership is kind of good design and solid collaboration, like everywhere, even
Yep,
beyond that relationship.
absolutely.
Do you find everything that's gone into the profession, like that back and forth, the kind of taking and giving, is it rewarding? Is it gratifying? Do you find it's unbearably frustrating at times? All the above?
All of the above. Yeah. It's so gratifying when you see something out in the world. It's so frustrating getting there, but when
Yeah,
it's there, it's gratifying. So that's really kind of like, I thrive on chaos. And
yeah, yeah,
uh, I really love that frustration, that puzzle solving, those days and nights working and trying to figure out the right answer and make them happy. And then
yeah.
when they're happy, then it gets out in the world and you see it out in the world, and it's such a tug of war every day of your life, but like it's really rewarding because I like that.
Can you describe the feeling or the sensation? I'm sure this has happened to you, where someone is aware of your work, or someone is kind of interacting with your work, or they've seen it and they perhaps don't know that you're the person responsible for it, or that's behind it.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen? What's that feel like?
Yeah, that's so Brew is another good example of that. I've been there many a times when I'm hanging out and everybody's like, oh my God, it's so cool in here. This is awesome.
Yeah,
I love the wallpaper or whatever it might be. Dietz Nuts is another one. Not to go back to that, but Dietz Nuts is one where people are talking about it all the time, and I'm like at a party and I
yeah,
overhear them talking about it, and I'm not the guy that's like gonna walk over and, hey, I
yeah,
invented
sure,
that.
sure.
And I led that project. But that's another one. Actually, funny story. I have this proof for my office of Dietz Nuts, like just the bag on the table, and I put it up on Facebook because I got a bigger one printed for my new office, and somebody bought it, and I told them that I kind of invented this product, and she like actually offered me more money for it. She came over like the next day, bought the thing, and she's like,
Yeah.
give you a little bit extra money because that's so awesome. And I was like, I'll sign it for you if you want. I didn't say that, but yeah, that's it. It it's just so rewarding. It's kind of like, a little bit. You feel like a little bit of a rock star.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Do you find, looking back on projects that you're several years removed from, do they age well in your mind? Do you want to go back and change them, or are they kind of?
Yeah, that's always that's the designer's curse. There's been I think in my 15 years I've redesigned my book maybe like 10 times, and also like there's always new ideas that are popping up, that you go back and look at this old product and or project, and you say, oh my God, this would have been awesome. And I think there's nothing wrong with putting work in your portfolio that's just not real. Like I mean, all these projects are real, but like just that general idea is out in the world, and like how do you just make it better? And I think that's so much fun. I've updated stuff from 10 years ago, like recently. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, sure. I guess, I mean, you would agree that's an important lesson, and again, for young designers, like this idea of like not needing perfection like every moment, because it's
exactly.
constant evolution.
You'll never reach perfection in this world. Coming close to it is all you can ask for.
Mhm.
But when you shoot for perfection, you'll always come close to it. So that's the
Yeah,
way I kind of look at it, design.
I got you. Taking notes here.
Mhm.
Um, to revisit, maybe to part briefly from your kind of professional career and what you've got going on right now. To kind of go back to your student days and talk a little bit about that experience. What was Westchester like around about the time that you were enrolled in the program, and what are some of the memories and senses of experience there you have?
Yeah, Westchester has always been just such a great time. It's always great people. There's people just really dedicated to learning and bettering themselves, and obviously it's a big party school, so there was that scene. But Westchester, I loved it. I mean, I learned a lot. I had Peggy Hill as a teacher. Is she
Mhm.
still around? Yeah. Peggy,
Yeah,
Larry,
yeah.
Will.
We
uh,
she just retired 2 springs ago, and she's
oh,
now,
really?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, enjoying well-deserved retirement. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always jealous of all my other friends though, because in the design world, and nobody understands it, understands this unless you go to school for design, is that you not only do you have your classes during the day, but you also get work every night for your classes later in the week.
Yeah.
And every other major, it's always like you learn today, tomorrow, the next day, and you do that for like multiple weeks, and then you cram for a test that's 3 weeks down the road. And design, you're like you're in class all day, and then if you have a part-time job, you got to do that. But then you also have to come home and you have to do your design projects for the next day, and it's so many more hours as a designer,
Sure.
and you
Yeah.
kind of miss out a little bit on the college experience, but it's also so rewarding, you know.
Hmm. Was that your situation? Were you someone who worked while you were a student, and had kind of external obligations outside of the classroom?
Yeah, so I had that. I was in a fraternity with Seth Birch, actually, who was a couple years ahead of me. So I had that going on. I had my design work, part-time job, full-time girlfriend, which is always a lot of work. So yeah, it was a lot going on, but I survived. That's I think the biggest highlight of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Do you remember what would have been an example of a particularly kind of valuable lesson, either kind of academically or personally, that you learned during your college years, that kind of drives you and influences you now?
Don't procrastinate.
Yeah.
I learned that a lot, but I'm also one of those people that thrive in procrastination. So, if I wait till 2 days before a big design review, that my brain is firing on all cylinders. But it's weird because a couple days before that, I have no idea where to start. I have no inspiration. I have no motivation. But when it comes down to a certain amount of time before something big,
Yeah.
something happens, a couple extra gears kick on, and that. But
Get the adrenaline going a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah, sure. Do you find that, again, looking back on maybe not just your education but your work, like the idea of learning and where learning takes place, are you someone who learns predominantly like entirely inside the classroom, or did you find yourself, you mentioned there's a considerable amount of work that happens on your own time, is that where you really
yeah,
make the profound breakthroughs?
yeah. I do a lot of reading, and not fictional reading, but I try to learn as much as I can. And every facet of not just design, but like typography, advertising. I try to read blogs and websites, and I try to stay up with current trends. And there's
Hmm.
so much more than just learning the technical skills and the concepting. There's once you get out of school, there's a lot more nuance to the things that you need to stay aware of and to learn. And it's not always related to design. Like
Right.
I love architecture and I love fashion and all of these other things, and that just being aware of the trends out there, and design out there, it still translates back into my design.
Yeah. Did you find that that's perhaps maybe a mandate for an aspiring creative artist, sculptor, whatever it might be, to have that philosophy where all information is useful information, not just necessarily
Yeah.
related?
Yep. I think anything that you can learn, and a lot of people think when they're going into a job, their inspiration is other people's design and other people's photography, and it's very narrow scope.
Mhm.
But when I start putting a mood board together for a new design or a new campaign or whatever it might be, it's very broad. There will be some fashion in there, there will be some architecture in there, there will be some color palettes in there, there will be a little bit of everything. And color palette, not in the sense of going on Adobe and selecting color palette, but taking a photo of something beautiful and using some of the software to break it down into really nice colors. Like, just inspiration's everywhere out there, and
Yeah,
some people get a little too reliant on the design blogs and stuff, but
sure.
if
Yeah.
you can find it everywhere.
When did you kind of realize that this was something you had both a talent and a passion for? When does that happen?
High school, actually.
Oh, yeah.
We had a graphic design program in high school, and it was nothing like what college is like. It was like you design something on Microsoft Paint, I think it was, or I forget what the software was. It wasn't Adobe, and you made like a T-shirt, you screen printed it, and I was like, oh my god, I love this.
Yeah.
This is so awesome. And then after I screen printed that shirt, it was all over.
Yeah, really. Did
Yeah.
you ever find at any moment, and I asked this question because I think as, artists in general, we kind of deal with the stigma of kind of projecting our interests into kind of the professional world. And
Mhm.
there's always that pressure to kind of, project like how successful will I be? Will I be able to earn money? Like, will I get a job? These kinds of real world considerations. Was there ever a moment where those types of thoughts, occurred to you as a student, and you maybe were tempted to switch paths, or were you ever curious about another, path that would have led you out of design, for example?
Yeah, personally, never. I actually look back to this day and I think, what would I be doing right now if I wasn't doing this? And I can't put a finger on it. I honestly can't figure it out. I have other passions, but nothing that I would want to do professionally, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned you shared, you're in the fraternity with Seth. Were you kind of surrounded by artists and designers at the time, or were your friends more kind of diverse in their interests?
No, I think very, very diverse. Seth was the only one that was that understood me because being
Yeah,
an
yeah,
artist.
yeah,
And Seth was actually the one that got me my first internship, which led me to my first job, which led me to my second job. So, I'm grateful for that, and I think that was really awesome. I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for Seth.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit, because that's another thing that, if you're leaving school and you're beginning to translate, some of your skills into, job candidacy, is it really who you know and not what you know? Would you agree with that,
I
or?
think a little bit of both. So I knew Seth, which got me in the door, which was great, and I learned so much from that first internship and job that it to this day I'm still a little ahead of the curve because of it. But yeah, I mean, it's also your talent level and your drive and your dedication, and that you can tell. Like, looking back, me as a creative director can look at people that are submitting their resumes and their portfolios. I can tell immediately through the first 30 seconds I look at the site how dedicated this person is and how detail oriented they are, and how it's just something I picked up over the years. So there's something to really consider is, you know, attention to detail and drive are very important. A lot of people rely on just their design skills, but that's not exactly what every creative director is looking for. They're looking for somebody that wants it and somebody that has something to prove.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can understand what you're saying about the immediacy of some of those ideas coming through, like attention to detail and kind of the amount of effort that's put in. What are some other ways you can tell kind of really strong young designers, especially those transitioning out of college, as opposed to the weaker ones? Like, what else are you looking for?
Uh, phew,
Maybe
uh,
more broadly, just like, stronger people you'd want to work with, as a,
yeah,
yeah,
to me, it's really that attention to detail. It's layout. It's use of grid and margin space. And it sounds stupid, but there's such little things, but also they create such a big difference when you fine tune those few things and you look at an ad or a design. You can really tell by those, at least to me, those couple things that where an amateur versus a professional lies. Even like little stuff, a lot of young designers don't bother to track their lettering, or they don't pay attention to leading, or the margin space around the edges is too small. Like, just those little things, it really does separate you from the crowd.
yeah, yeah. It, in kind of discussing like your early professional years, did you love every job you've ever had? Has it just been this kind of amazing, walk up the hill, or have there been mistakes? Have there been moments you regret, or scenarios you had to kind of remove yourself from?
So my first job was awesome. It taught me a lot of stuff that I use now, but it
Yeah,
wasn't super exciting. It was a lot of political work. It was a lot of layouts. But what was great about it was that it was so fast paced and it was so Photoshop driven and so typography driven that
yeah,
it taught me how to not only be very accurate and precise and polished, but also how to move quickly and thoroughly and effective. So it gave me these basic skills that now I could take my experience, creativity, and really create work at an efficient and polished pace.
Yeah. Speaking of pace, I know that I think we all experience the kind of academic pace, and then when you're working, it's obviously very different. Can you describe, just for the students, what that difference looks and feels like in terms of a couple projects and some deadlines?
Yeah, so I'm all familiar with that. So at many of jobs, I've had interns coming out of school, and I remember back in school when we would have a logo project, and it was a semester long project. I hate to break it to you guys, but it's now a 2 day project at the most, if not 1 day project.
Yeah.
Whether you're doing a logo or some sort of ad concept or photo concept, everything's much more fast paced. But I wouldn't freak out because it's not expected of somebody out of school, and you'll always have a mentor, somebody more senior there who's done this 1,000 times, who knows all the tips and tricks, and there's so many different things that you pick up along the way that help
Yeah.
you elevate you to that faster, more precision role.
Yeah.
But you just have to be willing to learn and willing to be mentored. And a lot of designers that come out now are just not willing to be mentored or want to work fast.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just a designer thing. I'm not sure, but the interns and the young designers that I've always bonded well with are the ones that are willing to learn, and they want to stay the extra hour or two, and they want to put the time in, because those are the ones that progress faster and they can help me in my job the most.
Yeah. What are other kind of good, pro tips for someone who's looking to improve the speed and the clarity with which they work, but also preserving, as you mentioned, precision, accuracy, still coming up with compelling ideas and solutions?
I think learning the ins and outs of Photoshop is probably the best way to go. That's the way I learned, and it really does help you kind of visualize your overall vision. And everybody works in Adobe or Illustrator a lot now, and I think you're missing a lot of what the Adobe Suite has to offer, because Photoshop, it just feels, when you see the work, it just feels much deeper. Illustrator is meant, it's misused nowadays, and it's more being used for like layout and photo work and stuff, and it shouldn't be, and it really should just be for typography and for drawing purposes only. So I see that as like something that younger designers are falling into just because it's easier.
Yeah.
They don't want to learn the Photoshop ins and outs, but I think learning Photoshop is really the way to go.
It seems to show up in your work, and again, like without knowing the exact process, but like a piece that comes to mind is the posters you've done for Reykjavik, and I think a couple in particular where you have the can of paint kind of pouring on, like that all seems so, as you mentioned, like complex and layered, and there's obviously like a tremendous amount of time that goes into not only like thinking about an image, but developing an image like that.
Yeah, that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll share your website at the conclusion, I think, for risk of like sending people away from the chat now, perhaps. But all of the work is available to see, and I'll make sure I include that in the chat box at the conclusion here. If that's cool with you, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm not one the type of designer to say you should do all Photoshop or you should do all Illustrator. It really comes down to the project and what you're trying to communicate and the core idea. It's really building around that, not saying I like this aesthetic or I like this layout or whatever, and then trying to smash it into whatever you're trying to do. It's really finding the core idea and then building on top of it yourself.
Yeah, sure. It makes sense. Do you kind of run into these situations where you have an idea in your mind? We had talked earlier about the kind of time frames of deliveries, like 1 day, 2 day, where this is a risk because this is going to take, to do this well, this will take half a day. And so if it doesn't work at the end of it, I'm in trouble because now I don't have any time left to come up with a backup.
Yeah.
Is that a problem designers run into, and like, what do you do to solve that?
Yeah, it's so that is tough for a young designer. And I actually learned later in my career that you can actually dumb it down a lot. It hurts as a designer to show really rough, clipped out things with type that's not tracked
Yeah.
and like a layout that's just slightly off. It really hurts. But showing some sort of rough concept really helps speed the process up, and it you feel as a designer you want it to be perfect, you want to look great, but kind of tucking your ego away until later stages of the design process is probably the best lesson I've ever learned. If you tuck your ego away and you just say this is the idea and this is what it could look like, and you try to let people use their imaginations, it actually takes a lot of stress off your shoulders. And you have to realize other people don't want to be like, clients a lot of times don't want to be force fed the full idea and the full picture and the final thing. They want their input involved.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you give them something final, that's where you run into problems where they don't like little tweaky things, or this color is a little off, or whatever. But if you leave it a little bit more general, then they feel like their input's heard and they can put their own ideas in, and they can take it to the next step with their ideas included. So it's a little thing.
And you mentioned earlier, it's maybe that resistance to that give and take that sometimes can be the like an impediment to young designers, or even seasoned designers who really don't want to lose like complete control perhaps of their work.
Yeah, it really, like, biggest lesson learned is tuck your ego away, because you will have your dreams smashed, but you have to always realize what you get paid for, what you do, which is awesome. You get to design every day, and you still get to make design work that you like and love, but it's not always you're not an artist, you're a commercial artist. So if you could take anything away from this, it's really just be happy that you get to do what you love to do in every day of your life. And it may not be 100% what you want, but it's at least 90-95%. So that's really awesome.
There's a question coming in on the chat. I want to, in the last couple moments, we have about 5 minutes left. By all means, if anyone would like to discuss a topic we haven't covered, we'll try and squeeze you in. Inez asks, how do you battle perfectionism? Knowing, as you mentioned, like the designer kind of cringes at not being able to finish something and present it because it's your work. Like, what do you do about putting that away for a side, or just, as you mentioned, keeping your ego in check?
Yeah, it all comes down to the really phasing out your design and knowing that it's not going to be perfect up front. And then once you get to a certain spot where the client's happy, you're happy, you battle that perfectionism against yourself. And it comes down to those final hours, final days, whatever it is. And that's where the extra hours come in. I've worked many 14-hour days in a row. I've worked many weekends. And it wasn't because I needed to, it was because I knew the project was in a good place and it needed an extra 10%. So it would stay the extra 10% late, where I would stay the extra 10% on the weekend. And I would really, it was for self-worth, and I'm a perfectionist, so I'll work whatever hours I need to get it to that spot where I'm happy with it. And I know the client's going to be happy with it. So it really comes down to phasing through the process. And then once you get to the end, really kind of taking it to the next level on your own time.
Gotcha. And then another question coming in, discussing your time at Westchester University. What would you say, if you had to pick one, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned, or you did learn, that would help you get to where you're at right now, or that you did that helped you?
Patience. I would say patience. It's a very subjective career that you're entering. And not everybody views design or the world or ideas the way that you do. And it's finding common ground, and it's finding common ground not just with you and the client, but what's best for the project. So it really requires a lot of patience and a lot of tucking the ego away and whatnot.
What's I'm keeping my eye on the time here, so we're on top of things. Maybe the last question here. What's a sound piece of advice to give to young people preparing to graduate and enter this field?
Just enjoy it. I mean, you get to make art every day for a living, and trust me, my friends never let me hear the end of it. I get so many jokes about, oh, were you playing with your crayons today? And what were you doing? Oh, did you wake up at 10 o'clock and then have a beer at lunch? And I'm like, you know, a lot of that is true. And I'm sorry, I don't, that's just the awesome industry that we live in. And uh, I just think, just enjoy it. I mean, this is a career where you can have fun at work and you can be a little bit more casual, and you have the place that has the kegerator at the end of the day, and you get to play with not crayons, but you know, you get to draw on your iPad and stuff. So it's really awesome. Just embrace it.
We're at the kind of time conclusion right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite anyone that wasn't able to kind of field a question, maybe to submit them to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and that way I'll be able to direct them to you kind of beyond the scope of this conversation.
Sure.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we put a bow on everything? I can't thank you enough for your time and your insights. I've never been in 45 minutes that's flown by so quickly.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
That was a second ago.
No, like I said, enjoy it, be patient, and we just have fun. I feel like a little league coach, but it really, that's like the world we live in, and it's really, some people get stressed out about it and worry about perfection and timelines and all of that, but it's really, it's that chaos and that fun and that unexpected life. There's just so many things that are awesome about being a designer, art director, just being a creative in general. And you know, it's the best industry to be in.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a blast for me. Definitely, I love kind of. I was familiar with your work before I ever met you, so I was one of the people who were, you know, I was asking about in the question, who'd kind of come to know you through like your creativity before I ever got to meet you, and it's a pleasure. So thanks so much for your time.
No, thanks. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, I'll be in touch because, well, I've got more questions also.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot them over, and feel free, anybody that wants to reach out, feel free to reach out, and I can answer any questions. So,
Seth, I know you're in the wings. Do you want to make any kind of closing remarks before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. It was a blast having Justin back, quote unquote, on campus for this discussion. This presentation was recorded, so we will make it available to anybody who registered. So if you want to reference it back for advice, visit Justin at his website at justinrentzel.com. You get some great examples of his work, a lot of it award-winning, so it gives you an idea on what's happening in the industry, what people are creating, you know, not just in the Philadelphia region, but internationally, you know, with the brands that he has worked on. So thank you again for joining us, and feel free to email David with any additional questions you might have.
thanks, Seth.
Thanks, Seth. And thank you, Justin. Have a good day, all right?
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
See you guys.